the planet Earth.
Some call me nature.
I am very passionate about the planet
Earth.
A living, breathing planet capable of sustaining whatever life forms we see fit to deposit on it.
Spock, judging by the pollution content of the atmosphere, I believe we have arrived.
It's the planet stupid.
No. It's the planet stupid.
Our guide for It's the Planet Stupid is eco-journalist Belinda Weymouth. Hi, Belinda.
Good afternoon, everyone. Great to see you.
Very excited about our guest. This is, I believe, the first guest we've ever had on this segment, and the segment's been around for a while.
Yeah. But, usually you just get me, but today we've got a climate and a rock star.
Yeah, exactly. A rock star in this world of the planet. In fact, in meteorology and atmospheric sciences, he's ranked as the #1 most impactful scientist. Spoken on TED Talks. Named one of the top 100 solutionists globally who have the impact on the world. He served on a committee to the U.S. Secretary of Energy. As I said, I mentioned this earlier in the show, on the David Letterman show, and co-founded the Solutions Project nonprofit. We'll hear more about that. And his work in the world of renewable energy is, I think, the thing that we can talk not only about today, but we can really speak of in an ongoing way, because it's clearly one of the issues of our time. In any case, without any further delay, here's Mark Z. Jacobson. Hi, Mark.
Hi, nice to be on your show. Thanks very much for having me.
We're very excited to have you. I'm going to step back at least a half step and let Belinda sort of lead things, because she knows perhaps how to take this discussion in a way that we can get the most out of it. So go ahead, Belinda.
Mark, hi, and thank you so much for joining us this morning. It's a while back when the first time I met you at UCLA, and it was a debate about, renewables versus nuclear, how can we make this transition? And I was just so transfixed by your vision of, a world running on 100% wind, water, and solar. And the fact that you have blueprints for, 149 countries, cities all over the US, every state, in this country. So I've talked about you before on the show, and I've shown them the fantastic Solutions Project website and how people can go there and see how their city could transition. And I suppose the first question, and what listeners will be thinking of, is it really feasible that we can go to 100% wind, water, and solar power on this planet that's so relying right now, and for the last 200 years on fossil fuels?
Yes, I think this planet can go to 100% clean renewable energy for all purposes within our lifetime, certainly even by 2035. And we have 95% of the technologies we need right now. And we do see such a growth of solar, wind, batteries, electric vehicles, heat pumps, even electric induction cooktops. We really need to electrify everything and provide the electricity, which is wind, water, and solar. And I do think we can do it, because not only do we have the resources, I mean, there's enough sunlight to power the whole world 3,000 times over on its own. There's enough wind to power the world about 8 times over for all purposes. And then we have other additional sources like hydropower and geothermal, and we have lots of storage technologies. And we've made a progress. I mean, there are 7 countries of the world that are 100% clean, renewable wind, water, and solar electricity generation in the annual average. Of course, electricity is not the only form of energy. We're trying to transition transportation, buildings, and industry as well. And that's going to take longer, but we have the technologies to do that. And even in the United States, we have a lot of really good examples of transitions. There are 12 states in the US that have between 50 and 100% of their electricity generation from just wind, water, solar. Most people wouldn't believe it, but South Dakota actually has the highest percentage of their demand met by just wind, water, and solar. It's mostly wind, but some hydro as well. And then there's Montana, Iowa, several states in the Midwest, because they have so much wind there, are already generating a huge amount of their electricity from clean renewable energy. California, which is the biggest state and also the 5th largest economy in the world, this year has around over 60% of its electricity generation is just wind, water, solar. I mean, last year was 53%. We've already jumped about probably 7 to 10% of this in 1 year alone.
And could I ask a quick question? With those states that are generating so much, I mean, I always love when I look at, South Dakota and Texas, that the incredible amount of, wind there, particularly say in a big oil state like Texas. How much are we actually using of that generation? Because I see in California, the graphs that you show on Twitter, there are, 8 hours a day when we're producing 100% of the electricity needs with renewables. How much are we actually incorporating into the grid?
Yeah, so since about March 7th in California, the state has generated over 100% renewables for part of the day on at least 86 days out of about 95. Excuse me. And the excess is used it's either stored in batteries or exported out of state. And then the batteries are used at night after the sun goes down. So it's not wasted. But in other states also, the excess electricity is exported as well.
So it is all getting used, and it will mean that we can get off our coal-fired electricity, our natural gas, faster. Do you see that with the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, that was the biggest piece of climate legislation ever in this country? Thank you, President Biden. Have you seen sort of a marked transition and the uptick, as far as deployment of renewables with that piece of legislation?
There has been in the last year a huge deployment, and I'm not sure how much is due to the Inflation Reduction Act versus other incentives as well. But the Inflation Reduction Act is definitely helping not only in electricity generation, but also in heat pumps, electric vehicles, some hydrogen, battery storage, electric induction cooktops, energy efficiency. I should point out that about 40% of the Inflation Reduction Act, though, 40% of the funds are used for technologies I don't think are very useful, but 60% are used for very useful technologies. What I don't think is useful is carbon capture, direct air capture, blue hydrogen, electrofuels. Those are all pushed by the fossil fuel industries and really don't help climate or air pollution at all. And then there's bioenergy that's pushed by the agricultural industry. And then there is nuclear power, which is pushed by the nuclear industry. And we're not going to build any new nuclear reactors, so there's no purpose in funding them. It takes 17 to 21 years between planning and operation of a new nuclear plant, and so it's just not helpful at all. But in the last year alone, in California, for example, there was a 31% increase of solar electricity generation. And I saw something today where US-wide, I think it's 20% higher, 25% higher solar generation than last year. So there's huge growth of solar. And then even wind has grown as well, about lesser amount than solar, maybe 11 or 12% in the last year. Battery storage has basically doubled. So you have those three, wind, solar, and batteries, growing by huge amounts just in 1 year. And this explains a lot why California all of a sudden has, for like 87 days out of 95 or so, 86 out of 95, we've had over 100% renewables on the grid because of the growth of solar, wind, and batteries in particular.
Yeah,
Mark, I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt, but I was going to ask, does the grid have to, obviously it has to be upgraded, but is the pace at which it's being upgraded, are you comfortable with it? In other words, can it meet the expansion of these alternative energies on the grid?
Well, we can always do things faster. And a big portion of the growth of solar is rooftop solar. So in fact, rooftop solar is really helpful because it avoids the need of a grid electricity, because people use the rooftop solar first for their own home purposes, and then excess is sent to the grid. So rooftop solar decreases demand on the grid, whereas utility scale solar increases supply. And with more and more build out of large scale utility scale renewables like offshore wind, utility solar, onshore wind, we're going to need more and more transmission. A lot of that transmission can go on existing lines, and some of those existing lines can be improved. There may need to be some new pathways, but hopefully those will be minimal. Offshore wind, we won't need so much transmission. But the more transmission we can add or improve on the grid, that will just make things more efficient. Last week, the Biden administration did announce a new initiative to speed up transmission upgrades. So hopefully that will help.
One of the things I remember you saying was, if we just put solar panels on every existing rooftop in the world, that would be 10 to 11% of our electricity needs, just like that. I mean, it's sort of, there's all this low-hanging fruit, it seems, like these kind of no-brainers. There are all these rooftops in existence. We need to, slap solar panels on every one of them.
Yeah, that's true. In fact, I think we can get up to 25% of all world energy on rooftop solar. There's plenty of rooftops, and it doesn't have to be on rooftops. It can be on parking garages. Well, parking garage rooftops too, but it doesn't have to be on building rooftops. It could be on parking garages. It could be elevated canopies over parking lots. You could put them on canals. You can put solar on reservoirs, on water. So there's floating solar that exists. You can put it on the sides of buildings. Now, fences, instead of having a wooden fence in pasture land to hold cows, you can put solar fences that are vertical and that have solar on both sides if they're east and west facing. So there are all sorts of options. That's the nice thing about solar. I mean, buildings could have a gloss of solar around them that you can't even tell it's solar, and they're still generating electricity. So
yeah, it's amazing, all the solar, solar in tarmac and asphalt on streets, it can be, everywhere. You can be walking around with a backpack that's got, solar panels. It's interesting that solar is sort of taking over from wind, because wind seemed like it was going to be the next this really untapped resource, particularly offshore here in the US, because I think when Biden, became president, we only had 7 turbines, which I could never believe. Like, really? Only 7 offshore wind turbines? But is it because of the regulatory process that wind is not going quite as fast as we thought it would, and solar is just much, much easier to install?
Well, right now, the solar is really, really inexpensive, and it faces, especially if it's a rooftop solar, you can put it up really quickly. You could put up rooftop solar within 6 months of planning it, and that, whereas utility scale solar farm might take 1 to 3 years. But offshore wind there's been offshore wind in Europe for decades. There's offshore wind in Asia, particularly in China, is just growing really rapidly. In the US, it's starting to grow. There are now a couple large farms that have been installed, or at least partly installed, but it's much slower than it should be. And it's definitely regulatory hurdles. Certainly, certain groups have been trying to oppose it, and that's slowed things down. But it is the hugest untapped resource, and a very important resource, because offshore wind is very much more steady than onshore wind. It goes 24 hours a day, whereas solar is just during the day. So solar, you definitely need storage to move some of the solar to nighttime. With offshore wind, you already have nighttime electricity generation and you have daytime electricity generation. It usually peaks at night, so it's really complementary with solar. So really a combination of wind and solar everywhere is the best solution. But some places have more solar, some places have more wind. I think wind is still, in fast wind locations, is still could be even cheaper than solar, like in the Great Plains. I mean, there's actually of the 12 states with the most of their electricity demand met in the annual average by wind, water, and solar. 7 of those 12 are dominated by wind. Only 1 is dominated by solar, California, and 3 are dominated by hydropower. So wind is still the dominant electricity generating source. Hydropower was, but wind is taken over that. But solar is rapidly catching up and will probably surpass wind at some point. But wind is still cheap where it's fast, and it's fast offshore, and it's fast in the Great Plains and many other places in the U.S. But offshore, the installation costs are really high, so that's why it's more expensive right now offshore. But ultimately, once we start doing it, by economies of scale, the price will go down pretty rapidly.
We're getting a few comments in that are instructive, and they also kind of, I think, reflect some of the pushback. But this first, Mama to 3 Boys says, my family members in Mexico all got solar water heaters as part of a government program years ago. They're very efficient. I wish they had them here. You're also seeing this from several people. Laka says, again, how are you paying for rooftop solar? Can you speak to where I'm seeing this from several people, who pays for rooftop solar? What's the incentive to put in rooftop solar? How do you pay for it?
Well, in terms of the water heaters, water heating, solar hot water heating on a rooftop is really preheating. It doesn't actually, you also need some additional source of energy to heat your water fully. But it's actually more efficient. I actually had to test this out because the choice is, well, do you want a solar hot water preheater plus like an electric resistance water tank, for water, the rest of your water heating? Or do you want to get a heat pump water heater and use solar photovoltaics on your roof instead of the hot water on your roof to run that? And I found that it's more efficient actually to have a heat pump water heater and solar photovoltaics on your roof to power the electricity for that heat pump water heater and for the rest of your house. Because otherwise, if you want to convert your house to entirely renewable, it's more efficient just to have one type of energy on your roof, photovoltaics, than have two, like a hot water heater and photovoltaics. Because in that case, more things can go wrong. You need more people working on your roof. You have to deal with more plumbing issues than you otherwise would have. So I would suggest going forward that solar hot water heaters are not the most efficient, but using heat pump water heaters coupled with rooftop PV is better. In terms of who pays for solar PV, well, first of all, it pays for themselves. In the US, there's still a production tax credit. So at the federal level, it's like a 30% tax credit. And depending on what state you have, there's probably state tax credits and incentives as well through the Inflation Reduction Act. There's also more federal incentives. But it's really pays for itself. I mean, I put rooftop solar plus battery system in 2017. I have not paid an electricity bill, and I electrified my home. I haven't paid an electricity bill, a gas bill, or gasoline bill. Also have electric cars since 2017. So that's 7 years, right? Now, 7 years now. And it paid itself off after about 5 or 6 years with subsidy. With no subsidy, it would take about 9 or 10 years, but solar is warranted for 25 years. Just to give you an idea of how good it is. I mean, if you, like where I live, the utility charges in the afternoon 60 cents a kilowatt hour now for electricity. The solar PV, if you cost it out, it's about 15 cents a kilowatt hour. So instead of paying 60 cents a kilowatt hour, you're paying 15 cents a kilowatt hour for your own electricity. And you can see how that's going to pay itself off. When you get subsidies, that'll also make it faster. But it's just you're avoiding these huge electricity costs. People are getting these huge bills because of high electricity costs. Because even though in California, for example, most of the during the day, most of the electricity is solar. That only costs 3 or 4 cents a kilowatt hour. Yet the utility is charging 60 cents a kilowatt hour. A lot for transmission distributions, a lot for all these costs associated with wildfires that were due to utility line sparks, due to gas explosions in San Bruno. There was a big disaster that the utilities have passed on to consumers. They have to strengthen underground gas pipes, so that cost is passed on. They have to put transmission lines underground. That cost is passed on. They are keeping Diablo Canyon Nuclear open with huge subsidies. That cost is passed on to consumers. The price of gas in California is the second or third highest in the US. So people are paying for that as well for backup. And so there are all these costs that people are paying for that have nothing to do with the electricity. If you have your own rooftop solar, you avoid all these passed on costs. And so it's a pretty quick payback time.
Just on the utilities, Brian says, how do we get the utility corporations to work with us for optimal use of natural energy production as opposed to dividends and profits for investors, or some of the stuff to which you just referred, settling various claims?
Well, the key is to electrify everything. And once you electrify everything, because right now some of the utilities are still dealing with gas and some are dealing with electricity, like PG&E in Northern California, they deal with both electricity and gas, so they have some incentive to keep gas. And so first of all, we need to focus on just electricity. And then there must be, there is a law in California to go to 100% renewables by 2045, but that's too late. We need it faster. So laws to transition to clean renewable electricity are beneficial to speed up, have the utilities speed up. Fortunately, there's a huge growth already in solar, and also wind as well, and batteries, and the utilities are doing that, but not fast enough in my mind. Especially in other states, a lot of other states, there still needs to be a lot of a push to go to renewable electricity. But what I found in this, of the 12 states with the most electricity as a fraction of their demand from wind, water, solar, 7 of those states are what we call red states that have no incentives at all in the states to transition to renewables, yet they have a huge amount of renewables, particularly wind, because wind is so cheap. So that's the nice thing about cheap solar and wind. It doesn't matter what your political persuasion is, most people still want low cost electricity.
Yeah, there's a built-in incentive. Go ahead, Belinda.
I think one of the things that's, really interesting and that, you point out, but it's sort of a hard message to get across, is that the initial price tag is huge, to electrify everything, in the trillions of dollars. But when you lay out the cost benefits that, as far as, how much climate change is costing us, the health costs with all the particulate pollution and the heat that we're putting into the atmosphere, the energy costs, that we'd actually save. I mean, aren't you saying that the overall savings if everything was on 100% renewable electricity would be around 90% on what conventional energy is costing us once everything is factored in?
Yeah, it's just on a worldwide scale. On a worldwide scale, it may cost about $62 trillion up front, but nobody's going to have to pay it up front. That's amortized over time. But when you look at if you look at an annual basis, worldwide today, people spend about $11 trillion per year on energy. That's expected to go up to $18 trillion per year by 2050. If you electrify everything and provide the electricity with just wind, water, solar, your electricity demand goes down about 55% just due to the efficiency of electricity and due to eliminating energy needed to mine, transport, and refine fossil fuels and uranium. I mean, just to mine, transport, refine fossil fuels and uranium, that's 11% of all energy worldwide. So we eliminate the need for that because wind comes right to the turbine, solar comes right to the panel, no need to mine it. And the rest of the improvements, most of the rest are due to the efficiency of heat pumps over combustion heating, the efficiency of electric vehicles over combustion vehicles, the efficiency of electrified industry over combustion industry. That gives you on the order of about 40%, 38 to 40% reduced energy requirements. And then end use energy efficiency improvements can get you to 54, 55% reduction. On top of that, there's the cost per unit energy with renewables is now less than the cost per unit energy of fossils. So we estimate about a 63% reduction of annual energy costs. So instead of paying $18 trillion per year, the world will pay on the order of $7 trillion per year in 2050 for energy. But that's not all. Health costs, due to today, over 7 million people die from air pollution each year worldwide. That costs the world on the order of $30 trillion per year in terms of statistical cost of life. Climate change is estimated to cost another $30 trillion per year by 2050. So that we would eliminate climate change damage and air pollution damage by eliminating fossil fuel and bioenergy combustion. So that's another $60 trillion per year savings. So there's a 63% reduction of the energy cost worldwide, annual energy cost, but a 92% reduction of what we call the social cost. That's the energy plus health plus climate cost in 2050 by transitioning. So it's a no-brainer. We also create many more jobs than lost, millions more jobs than lost, and we provide energy security with a transition. There's really no downside to this.
It's such a compelling case, and you make it so well. I've got to wrap up, but I wanted just to mention the Solutions Project. We're going to have a link to the Solutions Project under this video, but in a quick summary, can you just mention this is a real, first of all, the website is very manageable and it really gives you sort of a cool, instructive tour through the potential that you talk about. Can you just quickly give us something on the Solutions Project before we wrap up?
Well, the Solutions Project was a nonprofit I co-founded with Mark Ruffalo, Marco Krapels, and Josh Fox in 2011. And the original purpose was to try to take these energy plans that we were developing at Stanford University and to educate the public and policymakers about them in order to hopefully go toward a clean, renewable energy future. And so that nonprofit actually then worked with many other nonprofits and other groups, and they actually got laws passed. They helped to educate the policymakers and that who passed laws in many states. So we now have like 21 states and territories in the U.S. that have laws or executive orders to transition to 100% renewable electricity, and there are over 180 cities as well. But since in the last 5 or 6 years, the Solutions Project has going to focus more on inner cities and trying to get to focus on 100% renewable energy for 100% of the people. And so many disadvantaged communities. And so it's not working on large scale plans, but separately at Stanford, we're still working on large scale plans and educating the public and policymakers about transitioning the world to 100% renewables.
And I love the fact that educating the world and policymakers and media, I would say, the word's got to get out. And I feel as though that's sort of the work you do. We've got to wrap up. Belinda, do you have any last comments as we finish up, please?
Well, yeah, the last thing I wanted to say, I remember you talking about this, Mark, the resource that we really need right now is political will. And I've been talking about that every week on the show. We're coming up to a really, really important election, and it's really important, I think, and I think both Marks, I think you would both agree with me. We need to really educate all the people around us about how important this transition is, and that we have an election that is going to be really vital coming up, and by the end of this year. So we need to really move the needle on political will, don't we, Mark?
Yes, for sure. I think that's the one weakness we have is it's hard to educate the billions of people. There are 8 billion people on the earth. How do you get information out about what's possible, what their future could look like? And so I think if more people who know what is possible and also the benefits of a transition, then it makes it easier to agree to it. Otherwise, people are afraid. They don't really know what's going to happen, and they don't think that this will work, especially when there's almost all these naysayers who are critical without really knowing much about the situation.
Well, and there's a sort of a political agenda that underpins a lot of the negativity and naysaying. But in any case, I am encouraged, actually, after this immensely encouraged, sort of as you suggested, even in states just domestically here in this country where you wouldn't seem to find much cooperation, there is a move toward renewables simply because it makes the most sense. Makes most sense economically, and so it actually encourages me that worldwide this really is possible. I look forward to more. Again, we'll have a link to the Solutions Project, and Mark, I hope you'll visit again. Really a pleasure to meet you, and congratulations.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Thank you, Belinda.
Yeah,
thank you so much,
everybody. Thanks, Belinda. That's It's the Planet Stupid for today.
My pleasure.
More.
It's the planet stupid. No, it's the planet stupid.
Next time, only on The Mark Thompson Show.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.